Hello and welcome back to another edition of Unreal Engine Study Hall. This is Professor Ben Blau, and today we are going to be looking at what are known as world-aligned textures. World-aligned textures solve a certain problem that I know that just about everybody has run into as you get started learning how to make environments inside of Unreal Engine. This is one of those things that I wish I knew about a lot earlier in my own development. So let me first of all show you the problem here. So if I zoom into the playground here for a moment, and I go into starter content, we all know that there are some sample materials here in this materials folder. So let's take one example here, which is, I don't know, one of these brick materials, let's say. And I'll place it on this small object. That does not look so bad, right? Let's look at this one, and that doesn't look so bad either. That one, not so bad. Okay, it looks like a fairly okay material. However, if I take that same material and I apply it to larger meshes, well, you can see what happens. Then it starts to stretch and deform and not have the correct proportionality, okay? And that can be frustrating when you're first getting started, and what we're going over today is going to solve that problem completely. And it has some other benefits as well. I'm just hitting undo several times so I can get back to where I started. One of which is that it allows you to work to scale when you're working with especially Quixel materials, which is what I plan to do today, work with our free materials through Bridge. And know that the texture scale of a Quixel texture is always 1-to-1 with that actual object, or as far as I know, they're always 1-to-1 with the actual objects being scanned in real life. So I'm going to be mainly relying on these bridge textures here. As a matter of fact, let me go to my Bridge tab right now, get my meeting controls out of the way, and I'm going to download into this particular project an asset that I've used recently, which is this rough brick wall. So I'll bring it in. Oops, my meeting controls are sitting, of course, right on top of that now. So I'm going to bring it in at the highest quality, which is probably very, very overkill for this. That's going to be 8K. But in any case, before I import it, I want to take note for any kind of like a texture, okay, that you can get. There are some exceptions, but for most of the surface textures that come from Quixel, you can get the texture scale right here. So for example, if this was the texture I was working with, I would take note of the fact that this says 3 by 3 meters. And let's remember that one Unreal unit is 1 centimeter. So this is 300 by 300 Unreal units. That's something worth keeping in mind. At highest quality, excuse me. And that's 8K also, but it's a different scale. So we have to take note of whatever the texture scale is here that's being reported. Okay, so let's go with this brick wall once again, and I'm going to take note mentally of 2 by 2 meters, or in my mind, 200 by 200 Unreal units. And I'm going to click Add and wait for that to go into my project. I have noticed in Unreal Engine 5.2, sometimes it doesn't flip me over automatically back in there. That time it worked. Sometimes, I don't know, I've been having a little bit of a problem with that lately. So here's what we would normally see. It added a Megascans folder into our content browser and a surfaces subdirectory. And when I get into the rough brick wall, we've got a material instance, and we've got the 3 maps that it normally comes with. It has the diffuse map, and it has a normal map. But it also has this packed ORD map, and the letters ORD stand for occlusion, which is ambient occlusion, R is roughness, and D is displacement. Okay, so this is a packed map that has ambient occlusion, roughness, and displacement in it. I am going to completely ignore the material instance that comes with this material, and I'm going to make my own world-aligned material out of these same textures. To do that, I'll right-click and I'll make a new material. I currently don't know the best naming convention for this, but I usually go WAMAT because I think it's funny. WAMAT? Why not? WAMAT, World Aligned Material. That's what that means to me. And I'll call this brick wall. Okay, WAMAT brick wall. Let's go ahead and open that material by double-clicking and using the tab to dock it up here. As a matter of fact, let's not have it docked. I want it docked right next door to my main window here, not next to Bridge. Okay, so this material right now is just empty. Okay, so let's put some things into it, namely all three of these texture maps. So I can highlight all three, and then together, if I click and drag, left click and drag, and then hover over that tab, I can then drop them into the material editor. Okay, so now we've got the texture maps that we need, and let's just kind of put them roughly where I want them for now. Okay, so at the top here, you can see I've got my diffuse map, and in the middle, I've got my normal map, and at the bottom, I've got this packed ORD map. All right, so we're not going to do this the usual way with, texture coordinates and multiplying and scalars. We're not going to manipulate the UVs the usual way. We're going to do this a different way. The node that you're going to be needing for this texture sample and also for this texture sample is luckily the same node. So let's search for it. It's called World Aligned. And it's very easy to remember as long as you remember that this technique that we're applying today is called world-aligned textures. So if you simply remember world-aligned, all you have to do is type it and you're going to find what you need right here. What we need for this texture sample is this node, world-aligned texture, and I'll place it right next door. And I need that exact same node for the ORD texture down here, so I will copy it and I will simply paste it. Okay, so easy peasy so far. This node, the normal, is going to need something very similar, but instead of a world-aligned texture, and you may have seen it while I was searching through the world-aligned search, world-aligned, by the way, there's no space. And why don't you look in the list there and try to take a guess at what goes along with that normal map. If you guessed world-aligned normal, then you guessed correctly. Okay, so I've got world-aligned texture for the diffuse map and also for the packed ORD texture, and also a world-aligned normal node for the normal map. Okay, now you'd think that you should plug the RGB out into the texture object, but you see that's incompatible. Why? Because this needs a 2D texture object. I want to convert this, therefore, into a 2D texture object. And in order to do that, it's super easy. All I have to do is right-click on it and convert to texture object. We're going to do that for all three. Convert to texture object, convert to texture object, and convert to texture object. Great. Okay. Now what we want to do is plug those in, okay, like so. If you want to start previewing this, what I would recommend is maybe make this into like a square or something like that, okay? And take the XYZ texture, out of the world align texture node. You can plug that into base color. This is not going to look like very much yet, and it's also not to correct scale yet. The XYZ texture out of the normal into the normal, and the well, what I want to do here is I just want to use the first two channels basically. So let's split that. Split, or not split. gee whiz, break. Okay, out float 3 components. Excuse me for that oversight or that error. And remember that this is ORD, not RGB. Okay, that's just what it's being called here. So O, ambient occlusion, and then they must have some sort of roughness. Otherwise, why would they have made the packed map in the first place? So we'll put that in there. Okay. The next thing is going to be what controls the actual tiling of this and getting it to be a one-to-one relationship with reality. And remembering that this texture size was 200 by 200 Unreal units. Now, the way that we specify the texture size here, you can see, is by a vector 3. To get a vector 3, we can search for it, constant 3 vector. You could do like that, okay? Or I can hold down 3 on my keyboard and left click because we need these so often. I also need a multiply node, and again I can right click and search for multiply or whatever, or I can hold down the M key and get a multiply node. And now I want a scalar parameter, so I'll hold down S, that's the shortcut, hold down S and left click. And see if you can click fast enough to not to start naming it. But I'm going to rename the scalar parameter just size. Okay. So what we want to do here is we want to remember that we're applying this to essentially what is going to be like a cube, okay? At least at first, it's going to be a cube. So what we're going to do is we're going to remember what our texture scale was. And for this node here, we can type it in these little boxes or in these little boxes, is we're going to type 200 by 200 by 200. Okay, to get that to the correct scale. And we are now going to multiply that value, this is a vector, by a scalar. And make sure that that scalar, this is very important, is not set to 0, okay? If it's set to 0, it's going to multiply this by 0, and you're going to get nothing of any consequence appearing here. So to make this just default to the size that we typed in here, I'm going to enter a 1, okay? So that's going to be our default value for this size parameter. And connect that into B. And then this multiply, that can now go into the texture size of each one of these. All right. And now that is to scale, okay? That is absolutely to scale. One-to-one with real life. So let's now save this, and I'll show you some things that can be done with this. Okay, if I were to go back into my third-person template here, this is that world aligned material that I made. This is the original material. By the way, this came from Quixel, and you can see it's great, you know, but it has the same problem that that any other material would have. Okay, it stretches and deforms inappropriately according to the size of the mesh to which it's applied. So let's get rid of all of those. Now, if I take my material, or an instance of it, as a matter of fact, let's just go ahead and make a material instance of it without changing anything. You'll notice that I can apply that to anything now in the level here, and the scale not only remains constant, but also one-to-one with real life. Okay, so let's just, I guess, make everything out of brick for the time being, and this really is if now every object in the scene is made out of the same stuff. Okay, now obviously I wouldn't do this for a whole scene and every object in a scene. I just want you to see where I'm coming from with this, and I'll try to get that onto just about everything as quickly as I can. I'll have a lot of undo to click here in a moment. Okay, but this is great, right? Because this is going on everything, and we are not going to have to make material instances over and over and over again and manipulating UVs on them or creating complexity in our material functions to conform to the proportions of objects, okay? So let me just get it on those last little few pieces there. And now we're going to be in a completely brick environment, okay? And this is the actual one-to-one scale, okay, right from Quixel. All right? So that's one thing that you can know. So I'll just hit undo a million times here and hope that I have enough levels of undo. Okay, let's see. How am I doing there? Get off of everything? Okay, great. Another cool thing about this is, let's suppose that I create a piece of geometry. So let's go ahead and put something like a cube into our scene, and I apply my material to it. I can scale this into something like a brick wall, for instance. Let's set this to a slightly smaller snapping grid because I want to scale this to about the size of one brick. And we can make this as large as we want. And it almost becomes, it's not quite, but almost like a procedural tool, right? Because if I want more brick wall, all I have to do is scale it in whatever direction. I might have to adjust its transform also, depending on, which end of it is going which direction. But you can see here, despite the fact that I've scaled that, it is maintaining the correct proportions, okay? So I can make this, I could make this any scale that I want, and it's going to keep those same proportions just fine. And notice that there's no visible tiling when you do it that way, okay? So one last thing that I want to show you with this today is that it can be, to a degree, combined with displacement. And I know displacement has been something that a lot of people have been interested in lately. So in order to get into that, here is my recommendation is, let's suppose that I wanted to build that brick wall out with displacement. Which is true geometry. So like, for example, let me just get back on here one more time with this cube. Or better yet, I'll bring a plane into here, okay? And we'll scale up this plane, and I'll lift it up so you can see what I mean. If I put my material on there, from a distance, it looks right. And even if I move the light around, it'll give certain it'll have certain response to that lighting due to the normal map, okay? But if I get really, really far down enough and I look at this from the correct angle, that is an absolutely razor flat plane with no geometry. So any 3D appearance to this is due to the quality of the scan and things like the normal map doing its job in the material. Okay, so we can see that happening to a degree. If I could stop spazzing out on where my son is located. Okay, come on. You underground? What happened to my son? Panic. Where is it? Okay, sorry about that. I just lost my bearings. Okay, so one more time, Control L, and we'll see what just the normal maps are doing. Not nearly as much as what real geometry would be doing, in my opinion. Okay, so let's get rid of that, and we're going to do something using this material to create a brick wall that actually has real geometry to it, believe it or not, that we're going to derive from the texture maps that came with this simple material here. Okay, and to get into this, you need to use what are known as the modeling tools in Unreal Engine 5. You can find the modeling tools right here in our modes selector here, so we can drop down and select modeling. If you do not see that, you might have to enable it in your plugins, okay? So you can go to Settings, Plugins, and search for Modeling, okay? You want this Modeling Tools Editor mode, Beta. Don't worry about the fact that it's a beta. It's working just great. If that is not checked, you will need to check that and then restart your editor. I have had it checked for quite some time, so I don't have to restart mine. And I think it's checked by default, if I'm not mistaken, in 5.2, which this is, okay? So let's go into modeling mode here for a moment. And because a brick wall, if I had to choose a primitive shape to start me off with a brick wall, and I want to use this material that is true to scale, I think I'm going to start with something closest to a cube, which in this case will be a box, okay? So we're going to click that box, and this is a little bit, it's not, you don't drag, okay? So you don't click and hold to drag. You just click it once, and then just sort of place it in your scene by clicking again. Now, I want to set the dimensions of this box so that the physical dimensions are equal to the dimensions of the material. So we'll type 200, 200, and 200, like so, okay? If I feel like it, I can apply that material right now, and I do feel like it, so I will just drag that right in there, and all of a sudden we can see our cube of brick wall material. Now we can also use this for other things, other structures besides the brick wall, just by scaling it differently, like end caps and things of that nature. So, all right, so we'll just leave that as it is for now, and we are going to accept it. And what we've just done is we have created a brand new mesh, as you'll see as soon as this finishes cooking, so to speak. That's going to be a new static mesh in our level. Okay, so that should be done any second. Any second. Okay, there it goes. It's just named box by default. So what I would recommend is that you browse to asset, Command B, and I will say. I'm going to rename this so we can go just select it in F2, and I'll say brick wall. I'll say SM underscore world aligned brick. Okay, that'll be good enough for me. Okay, because I might use this for different things. This, however, still does not have any displacement on it. Oops, I accidentally moved the mesh. I didn't mean to do that. Okay, this does not have any displacement either. From a distance, it looks plenty 3D, but again, if we get really up close and we look at the edges of things, we can see that they are very, very planar, okay, flat planes, and don't have any real 3D geometry to them, okay? So we're going to fix that, again, in the modeling tools here. Now, we want to make sure that this has enough vertices, enough triangles, essentially, to be displaced well. So one thing I like to do here, because if we look at the wireframe right now, this does not have very much actual geometry to work with. Let me see if I can show the wireframe in this mode here. You can see that there's not enough geometry there to work with all the facets and microfacets. So let's just cancel out of that, and we're going to go back into regular lit mode. Oops, my meeting controls are on top of it, excuse me. Okay, so while I've got the mesh selected and I'm still here in modeling mode, I'm going to go down, scrolling down, until I can get to where it says Mesh Ops, right here, and this remesh tool. Okay, so the mesh is highlighted, and we're going to remesh. Now, you can see now that there's a little wireframe on here, and the default triangle count is 5,000. Now, for those of you who are more advanced than I am, there's probably a way of calculating exactly the right number of triangles that you would want here. But you can see that if I were to double this, 10,000, then we get even smaller squares. If I go to 20,000, or even smaller triangles, excuse me, and vertices. So frankly, I don't think that it's hard to tell. This goes up to 100,000. So let's try, I don't know, 30,000? I bet it doesn't even need this much complexity, okay? But I'll try it with 30,000 and we'll see how it goes. This is going to be nanite anyway, so I almost don't care. I'm almost tempted to set everything to the highest possible, but I have also gotten bad results that way for some reason. And there have been times that I've gotten better results with even the default value of 5,000. So let's just see how this goes. And if we have to do it again using the default value, we can. So this should have now enough vertices to deform nicely. So we'll hit accept. And it shouldn't look any different yet. Okay, so let's look at this now from a perspective that we can actually see the deformation taking place. Okay, and as a matter of fact, even before I do that, I think I'm going to scale the mesh in the scene in such a way that it is about the width of a single brick of a brick wall. So let's reduce my scaling value once more. Okay, I'm sorry, that is, scaling. So I want that to be smaller. Hold on, my meeting controls are in the way, as usual. And about one brick. That's going to be fine. After all, when you see this displaced, it's going to look all kind of like chunky anyway, okay? So we'll look here near the sides. We're still in modeling tools, okay? So let me just save this mesh while I've got it. And also, by the way, it's not a bad idea to actually remove, you can see this instance in the scene, it just says box, and it's technically not the same mesh. It's what the modeling mode is using. I would recommend actually deleting that and putting in yours, okay? The one that you renamed so that it has the appropriate level. The appropriate, title is what I meant to say. So right now we're back where we were before, okay? And I've got that scaled, and this is the new mesh that was generated, which, by the way, is located here. So content, anytime you do this, here's where it goes by default. Content, third person, maps, and in this generated folder, you'll have your little creator name or whatever. And anything that's generated with modeling tools is going to be put here unless you specify a different directory, okay? So I don't mind that it puts them there. Okay, so we'll look at it from this angle. And now we're going to go to displace. And at first it's going to look really wild and wrong. Okay, so we're not going to click accept yet. Please do not click accept yet unless you like the way that looks. And you should not like the way that looks, because it's applying a Perlin noise to the displacement of this mesh. Instead, what I want to do is to use the blue channel of the, you'll see that packed ORD map. So the one that came with this surface, okay, remember that packed map, ORD? The third channel of that, okay, the Z coordinate is the displacement map, okay? So I want to make sure that I use this texture map. So instead of using Perlin noise, we're going to use a texture 2D map. Okay, and switch it for that. Now that's something of an improvement, but we still do not have exactly what we need because we haven't popped in this map. Okay, so which displacement map do we want it to use? Strictly speaking, this is not a displacement map, but we know that it lives inside of this. So we'll pop it in there. It's going to look wrong once again, and the remember that the red channel is ambient occlusion, so it's not even the right map. So we need the Z. We need the blue, the RGB, the B channel or the Z, and that's going to be in the blue. That's going to be in the blue. All right, so now let's displace this a little bit. So now that it's got the right map, and make sure that we've got Why can't I select that? That's very strange. Okay, cancel. Let me select that again. Okay, somehow it got unselected. So we'll go to Displace. Sorry about that. Displace. It's right there. It should remember my settings, by the way. At least most of them. Blue channel. And that's way too much displacement. Okay, so let's take it down. Excuse me. I'll just type in a 2 and see how we do. Okay, so we'll start to zoom in there, and you can see, especially when you look at the edges, okay, when you start to displace these things, let's go up to 4. You can see things are starting to displace. Okay. And, you know, some of this, I think what I might have done is I might have used, in that remesh value, too many triangles, because this is getting some micro facets that I don't like. We can try to reduce the subdivisions here and see if that helps. Needs at least 1. Okay. So yeah, that did help actually. And we'll displace it a little bit more. 5. Let's try 10. Okay, and you can start to tell where it starts to look bad. Okay, so I think that the remesh was overdone. So why don't we get rid of this one, and we're going to do it one more time, this time with a lower remesh value. So let's go back into modeling mode. We'll make a box. Okay, and it remembers my settings. It even remembered my material, so that's good. So there's our box, except now let's go to remesh down here. And I'm going to use this time the default value of 5,000, and we'll see how that goes. And I can see the wireframe if I look closely enough. That's probably enough detail, so we'll accept. It may even be too much, okay? But as a matter of fact, let's undo that. Let's go back to remesh and look more closely at the wireframe. Okay. 4,000? 2,000? It's hard to tell. Okay. Yeah, because I don't want it to try to deform all these real micro facets, okay? But I want it to at least get the main geometry of this. So let's try to split the difference with 3,500, and I will accept the displacement, and we'll try again. Let's go back to, I lost my tool there for a second, displace, and we'll make sure that that's on the blue channel. Sometimes you have to unclick and reclick, recalculate normals. Blue channel, and now this is just too much, so we'll back off on it. 2. We'll see how that looks. Now, light is going to react to this much, much differently, because look, those micro facets in the material now cast their own shadows, and a normal map is not going to give that to you, okay? So maybe a 3. So you can decide how much displacement you want. So that looks pretty good to me right now, so I will click accept. And if I zoom out now, I can kind of make this into anything I want. Maybe I'll leave one copy of it someplace, and I'll just use instances of it. Excuse me, Option Shift. Oh, I'm still in modeling mode. I got to be in selection mode. So I'll just make a copy of it. I can scale it differently. And then this can be my brick wall. Get this thing out of the way. Oh, I somehow duplicated that. Get this out of the way. Okay, so one thing about displaced meshes when you make them is I find that they tile horizontally really, really well just by using the scaling tool. Okay, so actually let's get this, you'll see, after I get this more centrally located and I've got a little bit more room to move it around. Get this out of the way. All right. So if I were to scale it on this axis, it looks weird for a second, but you see everything readjusts. Takes it just a second, it becomes world aligned again. And it's almost like a procedural tool. And if you look at this, you don't see any seams at all. Even though this is not a procedural tool, it works almost as well as a procedural tool for creating things like walls. Okay. And if I need to disguise this geometry with something, there's probably a way of controlling that as well that I just don't know about yet. But keep in mind that this does retain the displacement information, okay? And it does get somewhat flattened out, though, so you might want to just thicken that a little bit if you do that. Okay, but we still have our displacement, and let me prove that with some light adjustments. You can see if I get the sun in just the right areas, yeah, here you can see all the self-shadowing. That's doing just fine. And if I get my player start, and it's probably right in the middle of the wall, let's just see what this feels like. Just walking next to a brick wall, or running next to a brick wall. Everything is displaced, everything looks really real in the scene. Especially with better lighting and other props and whatnot, okay? This, however, does not look as good when scaled vertically. And I just want you to be aware this is not a procedural tool, but you can kind of get away with it on the horizontal axis. A little bit on the vertical axis, but if you go too far, you start to see this banding. I don't know if you notice that. But that is noticeably tiling to me. So in my opinion, this works best when you are just scaling it on its length axis, whatever you decide that that's going to be. That I don't see anything distracting in there, even with my displacement. And even if I scale it up a little bit, it's still world aligned, okay? At least the material is. But remember that the mesh is not. Only the material is world aligned. So as I scale up the mesh, the mesh is going to start to no longer correspond to the size of the D channel, the displacement channel that we used when we displaced this mesh in the first place. So there's probably a dynamic way of linking the two that I just don't know about. But doing this on the length axis I don't perceive that as a problem. And then, of course, if you needed to make more brick walls, you can just Option Shift and let's say just drag a copy up. You can also overlap a little bit. They should have a point at which they tile perfectly. Okay. So let's really look closely at that. And I'm not seeing anything bad there. Okay. Let's play. It looks great. Okay. So we can do this again. Let's go into Quixel Bridge and get damaged asphalt, highest quality. We'll add this to our project. And we'll do this quickly one more time. We may not need to displace it, but we might as well at least world align it. And then if you feel like displacing it, you can do the same things that I did in the modeling tools. But right now, I just want the ground to be something other than this cube grid material. Okay. And this can be a nice little practice arena, by the way, for you to play with the world aligned materials. I think they're fun. So here is our damaged asphalt. I'm going to make my own material. Whamat damaged asphalt. Okay, I hope I spelled it right. Double click that to open it up, and we'll bring it over here. Make my life a little bit easier. Get our 3 textures, bring them up into there. And let's see how fast we can get this done. Okay, there's the diffuse map, there's the normal map, there's the packed map. We know these all need to be 2D texture objects, so let's just do that really quick. Convert to 2D texture. And we're going to go base color, meeting controls, normal. Excuse me, not yet, excuse me. I started to daydream there for a second. So we need a world aligned texture. World aligned texture. Fastest way to do this is copy paste, in my opinion. Copy paste so that we've got one down here for that one, and a world aligned normal for this one. World, I must have misspelled something. World aligned normal right there. Okay, so there. These guys can just get plugged in. XYZ texture into base color. XYZ texture into normal. And let's break this so I can use my ambient occlusion and roughness that came with this asset. I don't have to. I could always, do my own constants for that. But this is Quixel. I trust them more than I trust myself. OR roughness. Okay, and if you wanted to connect this into world position offset, it will do no harm. So let's apply, and this is now world aligned. So no matter what I make out of this, it's going to be 1-to-1 scale. It's not world aligned yet, I beg your pardon, because we need our vector 3. We need our multiply, and we need our scalar for size. Remember, that's going to have a default value of 1. And this is going to have a default value of whatever texture scale that was, which was 200 by 200 by 200. So let's go back into there, and, oh, wrong material. We can set it right there, 200 by 200 by 200. Okay, great. So let's multiply this vector by this scalar, which has got to be set to 1 for it to be a 1-to-1 relationship. And now this can feed the texture size of each of these world-aligned texture nodes and world-aligned normal nodes. Okay? And now we should be able to apply that. And whatever we apply this material to is not going to stretch and deform the way the default material will, but it will be a 1-to-1 relationship with reality. So here's the material instance that came with, okay? And you can see that's completely useless. Let's undo and use the one that we made ourselves. And I can put that on anything. And it doesn't matter what I put it on, it's going to look like it's made out of that stuff, that, in this case, the asphalt. Okay? And if that doesn't look like asphalt exactly to you, it's probably, it's partially due to the lighting and exposure. But remember, you can get into these materials and you can do a little bit of color manipulation if you need to darken it and whatnot. This was probably just very, very evenly lit when Quixel took the scans in the first place. And there's that little box. Remember that little box? Okay, that one can just be used if I need to just like, put like a little cap on the end of there, or I can make anything out of that I want. Maybe, other brick walls and whatnot, or just things for kids to play on. Let's just try to shrink that down a little bit so somebody can actually jump up on there. And is there a way through? Is there a way through for our Manny? I don't think so. So let's let Manny, oops. I'll get both of these at the same time. Scale, oh, there's 3 of them. All 3 at the same time, just so that Manny can find a way around there. I don't want that to clip. Okay, so let's take one last look around. Nice world-aligned brick wall, to scale. The ground is that poured asphalt to scale. And of course, we can make that look better with things like, oh, this is that asphalt that I have on the rest of the, or at least most of the rest of the playground geometry. Looks pretty cool. We can make that look a lot more realistic if we spend more time with the material and, randomization and so forth, as well as things like decals. I'm very, very into the use of decals, especially on things like walls and pavement and things of that nature. But this is a really, really good place to start when you're building out your worlds, and I thought that you'd enjoy it. So thank you for joining me once again. This has been Ben Blau, and this is another episode of Unreal Engine Study Hall. I hope to see you next time. Thank you for joining me. Bye-bye.